everyone and welcome back to my channel, BethChatsBooks. Now today's video is going to be a recent reads video. Now in previous videos I have explained to you guys that I am not doing wrap-ups and TBRs anymore, purely because it's a lot of stress for myself to try and get my numbers up every month, and recently I have not been reading anywhere near what I usually would read, and it's kind of made me have a negative relationship with reading, which I didn't want to have. So I eliminated that pressure on myself. So every couple of months now, or every month, I might do a recent reads video in which I wrap up what I've currently been reading. And then my number for this recent reads is very small, but this video is not about quantity, it's about quality, and I had some good reads recently. Now before I get into those, I just want to apologise for the whirring noise in the background. I put my dehumidifier on for a little bit because it is Saturday. I've got all my chores done for today, tidying my room and updating my university work, kind of reading through slides and writing notes and all that palaver. So I thought I would film a video. Now last week I didn't film a video and I was desperate to try and get one done in the week. And it was just a very stressful and long week and I just did not get that done. So I'm going to do two videos for you. So there's going to be this video, which is my recent reads, and then I will also be uploading a unhaul video, so keep your eyes out for that. So without further ado, I'm just going to get into this recent reads video. So the first book I read recently that I want to talk about is Order of the Phoenix by J.K. Rowling. Now I don't know if I've mentioned this previously to you guys recently, but it was a hefty book, so it did take me a very long time in October to get through. I thoroughly enjoyed that book. It starts to complicate the relationship a little bit more that we know and love between Dumbledore and Harry Potter, and also Snape and Harry Potter. So we get a lot more complexity of characters in this. I was surprised upon rereading it in adulthood about a lot of the stuff that gets mentioned in Order of the Phoenix that are relevant and important to bring the plot forward. Now Order of the Phoenix, I believe, is not everybody's favourite book, and I might just be completely being controversial here, but it's one of the books in the series that I see as an important book to lay the groundwork for future books. Not a lot in terms of action happens, but we have to lay the foundation about the prophecy between Harry and Voldemort, and we have to sow the seeds about where the darker kind of plot is going to go. So I obviously was very attached to Sirius, and this is the book in which we lose him, which is quite sad. I overall gave this book 3.5 out of 5 stars because it is not my favourite Harry Potter book, purely because, like I've said, it's a lot of groundwork with not a lot of enjoyment, and obviously Sirius dies, which is very sad. I've put down in my notes, sorry, I'm just kind of glancing at the notes that I wrote down because it is a bit of a long time since I've read it now that I'm filming this video. Down a lot of feelings about the plot being slower than Goblet of Fire, and yes, again, it's a context and a stepping stone kind of book to the wider plot that we need to know about Voldemort and Harry's relationship. What I really liked about the pensive scenes when he manages to read Snape's memory is about this kind of complicated relationship between Snape and James Potter, which Harry obviously watches from a biased perspective of Snape. However, it's interesting because it begins to complicate Harry's pristine notion of his parents. So when he was younger, everyone said, oh, we loved Lily and James, and you've got Lily's eyes and you're just like James. But he never knew the identity of his parents as people, and being able to see these memories back is very interesting because he now starts to have a more complex view of his parents as whole humans and individuals, and problematic individuals, instead of the kind of one-dimensional view of them as heroes. That image has always been presented to him by other people because his parents obviously died protecting him, and that's a memory that kind of has a lasting impression on what he believes his parents are. So I found that bit fascinating. I really liked here that I've put down in my notes that Neville, Luna, Tonks, these characters start to be solidified more and get more growth, and we get to get more of their personalities coming through than in the previous book, so that's some good points. But overall, like I said, I gave it 3.5 because it isn't my favourite one and it is lengthy. And then the next book I want to talk about is Normal People by Sally Rooney. Now this has been hyped all over the internet, social media, a lot of bookie people, a lot of papers and prizes have said fantastic things about this book. This was on the Man Booker long list, and I went into it with kind of neutral expectations. Now, this book took me on a very big journey. So when I first started reading it, I was completely hooked. I completely agree that Sally Rooney writes characters and their development and what it's like to be through this teenage phase fantastically. It starts off with them both at high school, Connell and Marianne. Sorry if I've butchered either of those names, that's how I thought they were pronounced in my head. And that kind of social awkwardness of being a teenager and wanting to impress the group that you're in, and Marianne is not bothered about that. She does her own thing, and obviously she's ridiculed at school a little bit for that. And Connell is quite popular, and he starts to develop feelings for Marianne, and he doesn't really know what to do about that because he thinks that that will affect his cred, his street cred with his friends. And in the backdrop of this, there's also a little bit of commentary about their social standing. So Marianne has a wealthy lawyer mother, and Connell's mum is employed as her cleaner, so they know each other through that relationship. And how that also complicates things because he has a bit of a chip on his shoulder about how he's grown up, and how Marianne is completely oblivious to that, being of the social standing that she is. And then the plot kind of takes these two characters forward. They go to university, to the same university together, and I was completely immersed in their relationship. I thought it was fascinating. As I got further into the book, a lot of things became issues for me, and one of them is Marianne's state of mental health and the lack of sympathy and support that she gets throughout that journey with Connell. How he seems to expect a lot of her when he goes through some mental health issues, but doesn't really acknowledge how he's affected her mental health from the beginning of their relationship to the end. And so I became quite emotionally conflicted between these characters. I kept cheering for them, and I really wanted them to get together, and there's a lot of will they, won't they throughout this book, which I was engaged by, obviously being a romantic at heart. But I feel like this book took on some sour notes and didn't really deal with them. They presented their relationship in sometimes quite problematic lights, and it wasn't dealt with. Now, maybe as I'm saying this all out loud and vocalising it, I realise that that might be the point and the intention of Sally Rooney's writing, to present these problematic issues, and it's not her responsibility to resolve them, and I understand that. But I ended up really anxious and worried for Marianne, and I really felt like Connell wasn't the support system that she needed. There's an element in the book where he kind of becomes a hero, but it's not dealt with explicitly. I don't want to spoil this book. Always been an underlying infatuation from Marianne's point of view, and to some extent in some elements of this book Connell exploits that, and I was not comfortable with that. But again, that might be what she wants to present in her writing. So ultimately, what I want to let you guys know is that Sally Rooney is an absolutely fantastic writer, and all the praise she gets for how she can develop characters, how she presents relationships, how she really gets into that teen angst element of what it's really like to be awkward and at that age and have all these strange feelings and your body's changing and everything's a little bit off. That is fantastic, and she is a great writer and she has great potential. However, when I read this, I did think there were some kinks that could have been ironed out, and you can read her age through this book, and that's not a criticism. I just feel like she has so much more to give, and these are her taking the training wheels off this particular book, and maybe Conversations with Friends. I haven't read that. But reading this book will definitely encourage me to read Conversations with Friends because I really like her style. However, I did have some issues, and I am still very anxious for Marianne after finishing this. I gave this a 3.5/4 out of 5 stars because the writing is fantastic. However, I have some issues. How it was left and how I feel. But yeah, Sally has so much potential as a writer, and I would recommend this book to people who really are intrigued to see how it goes. And I would love to have a conversation with anybody who's really enjoyed this book and might feel slightly the same way as me or thinks I'm absolutely bonkers. I'd love to discuss that with you guys further. So if anybody wants to put a comment in the comment section down below about how you felt about it, I'd be happy to talk. So there's that one. And then the last book, sorry, I have a really itchy nose. So the last book I read was an audiobook, Haunting of Hill House by Shirley Jackson, and I buddy read this with Fun Size Steph, who I will link her channel down below, and we are currently also embarking on watching the Netflix series together. So I haven't watched any episodes of it yet, but I'm planning to tonight when it's a little bit dark, and once it's nice and dark and it's getting into those wintry nights, I'll be quite excited to watch that. So we are planning to watch it together, but we did read the book together, but I read it on audiobook and she read the physical copy. And I was listening to it in the mornings when it was a little bit dark, and then in the evenings when it was a little bit dark when I've been driving to and from work. So it's a good way to get some bite-sized reading in, because I listen to the radio all day at work and I refuse to listen to the radio on the way home or the way to work. So I enjoy listening to audiobooks and podcasts. Slight detour over on that one. So I absolutely adored The Haunting of Hill House. It was a perfect time of year. It was just coming up to Halloween when we finished it. It is so subtle. I love that the horror isn't in your face. Now, I've heard a lot of things about the series and how there is a little bit more horror than in the book, but there's this subtle horror in the book that's not overdone. It has this gothic Rebecca vibe to it. I didn't mind the character of Eleanor. Now, she is quite self-indulgent in how she's so infatuated with Theodora, which is another character in the book. She's a little bit woe is me and a little bit lost and a little bit of a wet lettuce in general. But I didn't mind that because the way that Shirley Jackson writes and that old time kind of language, I like indulging in a little bit of the inner monologues of woe is me characters every once in a while, and so to me that wasn't an issue, whereas I know some people find Eleanor quite irritating. So basically the book revolves around 4 characters: Eleanor, Theodora, Luke and the Doctor. And the Doctor has set up an experiment where they need to come to Hill House, and he believes it's paranormal and he likes doing a lot of studies and research around paranormal activity. So they've all been invited because he's found out through kind of researching them that all of them have had some kind of relationship with the paranormal before, with either without them knowing it or with them knowing it. And that's not really explained very well in the book about how he would know. So for example, Eleanor, they believe she has spoken to spirits before because there's an incident in her childhood where rocks move and there's no explanation why, and it's very strange now I think about it how the Doctor would know about that. But regardless, and Luke is invited because he's going to be the sole heir of the house. And it's really interesting because it's one of those ghost stories that's great, because when some of the weird things happen, all of the characters see it, and one of the cliches that irritates me in horror is that only one of them sees it and then they think they might be going nuts because no one else acknowledges it. So I did quite like that they all did see it. However, it does become evident that one particular character is experiencing or is affected a lot more than the other characters by the horror. The ending, me and Steph for some time have tried to talk about this because it was very ambiguous and we have a lot of question marks about it, and we would like to know how the series is going to use their creative license to dictate how the ending happens and why. However, I have heard rumours that The Haunting of Hill House, the actual series, is unrelated entirely to the book, so maybe they will not do the ending, maybe it will not happen, I don't know. I'm quite a fan of faithful adaptations, so if the Netflix series isn't faithful, then I might go and find the adaptations and see if I can find a faithful matching, because I did that with Rebecca and it was so satisfying to read the book and then watch the Hitchcock version and kind of see what it's like visually done on screen. But anyway, absolutely adored it entirely. I rated it in my little notebook here 4.5/5 out of 5 stars. The more I think about it, it's one of those, it's a bit like Rebecca and the Virgin Suicides. It will stick with me, and I would love to reread it in physical copy and see how that changes. I know for some people who are bloodthirsty, it didn't really satisfy them enough. To me, I love the atmosphere, and Shirley Jackson is quite like Daphne du Maurier in writing atmosphere very well. Something unnerves you and you can't really figure out why, and the subtlety of that. And I have previously read short stories from Shirley Jackson, and I was really nervous about reading a novel of hers because I really wanted it to be fantastic, because I know she's such a good writer from reading her short stories, but I could never really connect with her short stories, which a lot of people have. So I wanted to read her novels and see if I could find a way to connect with her, and this did not disappoint, and I would recommend it to anyone, especially this time of year when it's a little bit wintry, a little bit cold, and you want something a little bit satisfying. So after reading that, it really satisfied me, and I really want to get into more thrillers and gothic and atmospheric kind of reads, because it's this dark time of year, and let's do it, why not indulge? So if anybody's got any gothic thrillers that they would like to recommend me, I've previously been a fan of The Silent Companions by Laura Birchall, Rebecca by Daphne du Maurier, those kind of books. I would love it if anybody who is also a fan could recommend me any that I haven't read that I could get my teeth into. So this was a very long-winded video, and I wanted it to be concise because I have a problem with wittering on. But thank you guys so much for watching. Please hit the subscribe button if you want to be alerted for when any of my future videos come out, and I'll see you very soon with a brand new video. Bye now.